Devoid!
Devoid.
Depot. Devoid.
Speaking of best moments, welcome to Devo Devoid. I'm Matt Fagan. With me here is my brother, who has not yet disowned me for making him watch the following movie.
And I'm Ted Fagan, and I tried to watch this movie a second time and take notes. Fuck that. I fell asleep less than 5 minutes in because it's not worth thinking that hard about.
I was going to watch it a second time and take notes, and I'm going to say that that didn't happen because your wife was here and we were talking. And I'll blame her and take no responsibility for the fact that I basically didn't take any notes about Alien versus Predator. But I will agree it's not particularly worth taking notes about. I will say I saw this movie in the theater in 2004. Um, Photobomb. We just got photobombed by a cat. Is that the cat that tore your arm up earlier?
Yes, Moonraker.
Excellent. Um, I saw this movie in 2004 and I was looking forward to it, although I did assume at the time that it would not be very good. Um, Alien versus Predator is one of those things that people had been talking about for many years as a thing that could happen. Because in the movie Predator 2, we see the skull of a xenomorph alien in the Predator's trophy room. And and fans across the world went crazy and they threw up their arms and said, "Praise Hollywood, bring us Alien versus Predator."
They
And
should
it
have
took
cried.
a while.
They should have cried because that movie that it came out of was really, really bad. If I
Oh yeah.
remember right from when I
Yeah,
woke up last
absolutely.
night with my cat sleeping on me after I'd fallen asleep watching the bullshit movie we're talking about now, I was seeing Danny Glover was in that.
Oh yeah, yeah, he was the
So
main
it
dude.
was Lethal Weapon.
It was honestly here. No, this, I mean, I think this one is more Lethal Weapon. Um, but Predator 2 is the reason that I will unequivocally state that even in 2004, Alien versus Predator was not the worst movie in either franchise. And that's gotten more true in the intervening years. But
Right.
even in 2004, when it was really mediocre, it was not that bad. It's pretty bad, but I mean, it's not that bad.
Yeah, you just keep telling me that.
It is not, however, altogether reconcilable with either franchise. It plays a bit fast and loose with some of the rules because it's not about that. It's about being Alien versus Predator. As someone who owned a comic book store for quite a while, this is every conversation that happens in comic book stores. Who would win in a fight between? That is where this comes from. This is just fan service, and it always has been. There are lots of great mashups. They're all mediocre. It doesn't matter how much you enjoy them. They're all mediocre.
No one's going to ever be pleased fully by the way that something like this works out. But this one, at least in my mind, was particularly embarrassing. And yeah, of course, I mean, it took all the cop outs it possibly could. And honestly, the way that this movie was done, they didn't even need to bring humans into it. They pretended to have a reason for it,
Oh
and
no, I
it
would
was
I would
trash.
be fine if we never had any people in it. And hopefully we'll get that movie someday too. Um, this one like it does some things wrong. Like, for example, it is never at any point remotely scary.
No, no, not once.
It wouldn't hurt the movie if it was at least a little bit scary sometime. But it's what it does do right is it doesn't hold back on delivering its premise of Alien versus Predator, which I'll say this movie, there's not a lot of like big budget like franchise crossover movies. I mean, there's a few of them. Like, for example, Freddy versus Jason. It goes all the way back to the 40s with Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. But this is something that we just like to do. Um, when companies own two properties, they love to put them together. When separate companies separately own properties, it's a lot harder to put them together, like Freddy versus Jason. Um, because you have to get a lot of people to agree on things in advance, which makes it really hard to shepherd a project when there's like probably a lot of restrictions going on from people who don't really have any creative bones in their bodies. Um, but it was interesting because in a 1 year period between August of 2003 and August of 2004, we got both Freddy versus Jason and then Alien versus Predator. And those are two pretty big crossover properties that a lot of people have been talking about for a long time. Both of them pretty mediocre when it
Well,
comes right down to it.
I've only ever seen one of them, so
And it's, I mean, this is barely even a criticism. This is just and accept I accepted that before I saw either of those movies. Um, but what both of them did right is they find a pretty simple way of getting the two things together that at least sort of makes sense. But what Freddy versus Jason did wrong is keep your title monsters way too separate for way too long, and they don't even really put them together until like halfway through act 3, and it's extremely frustrating. Whereas this one, by the halfway point, you've already got like full on Alien versus Predator conflict that keeps happening until the end of the movie. Like, whether or not that movie is any good, at least it's giving you Alien versus Predator, which it tells you
yeah.
it's going to give you.
But I bet that Freddy versus Jason didn't like feature an extended shot of a distended cloaca pooping out the eggs that are hatching way faster than they should. And also, it probably didn't have Freddy and Jason babies having a gestation period that is significantly accelerated and unrealistic for the show
That
and fucking it up.
is true. That is true. Although I would say it would have been less appropriate in Freddy versus Jason to have an extended cloaca shot.
I
Now,
don't think so. I think that, with us
I've seen a
having
lot more Freddy and Jason movies with than you have, and I am
you've seen
certain that the
almost
cloaca
more.
premise is sparse.
We've talked about, or sorry, other people have talked about Jason being a frog boy or a lizard boy. And I think that there is actionable cause to assume that if Jason dropped trow, he might have a cloaca.
He might have a cloaca, but he's not going to distend it as an ovipositor.
Are you sure?
I am sure. I am 100% certain.
Wait,
That is
what movie does
almost
this
the
come up in?
only thing that I believe in this life.
What movie does that come up in?
Um, that would be in Jason versus Q the Winged Serpent,
Yeah, I think you made it up.
directed by Larry Cohen.
I can't prove you wrong because I don't have
Exactly.
internet.
Nobody can.
Nope. We don't have any internet.
There's no way to verify any of this.
Well, in that case, if there's
But
no verification,
I
I'm going
have
to
the
go on file right now as saying Jason of Friday the 13th, in fact, does have a cloaca and poops out little Jason eggs. And that should be a candy at the next theater release.
That's going to be in the sequel to the 2009 remake when they finally get around to it.
Yeah, and it'll hatch, and there'll be a little machete baby going.
I I almost hope that doesn't happen. My personal favorite was whenever I was for years, whenever I was drawing comics and I needed a movie poster in the background anywhere, it was Jason versus Gamera. Gamera being a huge flying nuclear super turtle from Japanese monster movies. Um, because Gamera standing up on his hind legs and the hockey mask have roughly the same silhouette. And so they make a great versus poster with like half the hockey mask coming in from the left side and then half of Gamera coming in from the right side with a versus in the middle. Um, which I was doing for years, and then Freddy versus Jason came out, and that was basically their poster. It was awesome.
Good times.
I would still dearly love to see Jason versus Gamera. I I love a versus movie. This one has grown on me over the years because um it is less terrible than many versus movies.
Well, on that note, I'm going to jump through all of the bullshit that is the beginning of the movie, that none of it matters. We see a person who's clearly going to be a main character. We decide that we need to bring in Wayland. We bring him in. Something happens. Blah, blah, blah. People fly away to this area where there's some hot shit underneath the ice. And we need to go figure out why this shit pyramid is all hot. And then some people die, and we see a hole that's carved into the earth by some magical hot drill. And then everybody falls down the hot drill hole that doesn't die, including Waylon, who's like, "Oh, I have to do this. We need to bring me along so I get murdered." It was fucking bullshit. Anyway, and then we can pick up
It
at the
was
base
it
of the
was your
pyramid.
basic action epic assembly montage.
But it wasn't even
Um
a good assembly montage. We don't find
no,
useful people of any kind.
but
It's all
it was
cannon
less
fodder.
annoying. It was less annoying than the equivalent scene from any Roland Emmerich movie. Any one of your like 2012s or your ID4s or any of your big fucking end of the world action epics where those things go on way too long. This one at least it only takes a short amount of time. And it wastes a little time because obviously we don't care about any of these people and we never will. Essentially, there are only two humans in this movie who matter at all, Lex and Charles Bishop Wayland, played of course by Lance Henriksen, who now dies in Aliens and Alien 3 and this one. So he clearly has the most deaths for the whole franchise.
It's good,
But those, yeah, they're the only people that matter. Everyone else is essentially disposable. Um,
as they
and
are.
they don't really treat them as though they're more than that.
No, no. I mean, they're breeding vessels that apparently only take between 2 and 40 minutes for the alien to pop out of.
Yeah, this is the biggest crime against the franchises that this movie commits is just completely throwing what we already know about alien biology sort of out the window. The gestation period of the embryo once it's implanted in your chest is the biggest change, but there are a lot of like fundamental things that they don't really think through, like having all of the eggs opening just sort of at once as though that's a thing that happens. Like they don't just hatch all of the face huggers. They're smarter than that. Like the face huggers hatch when there is a host available and not before. That's why only one fucking egg hatched in Alien, because Kane is the only guy who went in there.
Yep.
That's not how it works. But this movie is more than happy to sacrifice that sort of narrative continuity for a cool image, like zooming out backwards but showing all of those eggs opening up in a series of blooms. It's very comic booky, but the comics actually think things through a little bit more than this movie does.
Yeah.
The whole Alien versus Predator thing really started with Dark Horse Comics, who had both licenses at the same time at the end of the 80s and the early 90s, and they did quite a lot with them. Better than this movie, although this movie largely confines things to one location so that they could keep it pretty cheap. I suspect that the return on investment was pretty decent for this movie. Um, but the comics are generally better. Weirdly, there is a character in this movie. The character's name is Mark Verheiden, which is the name of the guy who wrote the first Alien comics for Dark Horse Comics, but is not the guy who wrote the Alien versus Predator comics. And there's no apparent nod to those people in this movie, but they are name checking Mark Verheiden for some reason. It's just kind of neat. Little Easter egg, I guess, but would have made a little bit more sense if they were actually making a nod to the Alien versus Predator comics.
That would have been smart, but this movie isn't.
It's not. No, it's not. It's kind of cool at times and frequently fun. It is not good or smart. I
All
think that
right.
this is a movie that once you know what it's going to give you, if you watch it again in like 5 years, it will be much more fun than it is when you watched it the first time. Because there you won't have it, you know it's not any good, and you'll just enjoy what it is, which is, action packed and goopy.
Yeah, no, they go into the stupid pyramid. There's terrain shifting and everybody's getting
Well, so I mean, I don't want to
isolated.
go through everything, but let's say the basic premise, in case someone is actually listening, um, is that the predators have used for many years now the
Millennia.
xenomorphs, as training tools. They are the ultimate prey for them to hunt, and so as a rite of passage, they go to these pyramids where they have a setup where they can sacrifice humans to gestate aliens, so that they have the ultimate prey for their young predators to hunt, and blood themselves. And they've been doing this on Earth, presumably a lot of other places too. They come here every 100 years. 100 years ago, it wasn't buried under the ice, I guess, and now it is. Uh,
Because that's how ice caps work.
yeah, it is. It's been for in 100 years. That's what happened. Don't ever question the science in this movie again. Uh, yeah, the whole thing is taking place in a pyramid that's under the ice, under the polar ice cap.
That wasn't
Hilarious.
there 100 years ago.
Here, look, Ted, here's what you don't understand. And they're trying to be super respectful to the lore here, because we need to contain this amazing bit of action storytelling. Because if anything gets out, it spoils the timeline. So we already know that we didn't know about aliens hundreds of years from now when we're on the Nostromo and Kane gets a face hugger, and he's the only one that gets a face hugger because the other ones don't all open because there was only one available host. That's what we know. So we know that this all has to be hidden under the ice, conveniently under the ice, and then the timeline is saved until Alien versus Predator versus Terminator, where they introduce time travel.
Now, is that a
Coming
movie too?
2025. Huh?
Is that a movie too?
No, it may be a comic. I don't know. Because Dark Horse had that one too.
All
Um,
right.
they're the ones who also publish RoboCop versus Terminator.
Well, I mean, that's at least a feasible one, which still, fuck RoboCop, but, you know.
Honestly, it was pretty good. Some of the Dark Horse ones are really fun. That's the other thing is, and I'm not sure why this is, but I think we put such a premium on movies. Like Dark Horse published a number of Alien versus Predator stories. Some of them are better than others. Some are really fun. Some are garbage. Some are just, whatever. But they're enjoyable, and it's like we don't expect them to be any more than just like a fun time. But for some reason, because the movie is such like a much bigger undertaking, we it's like we demand more from it. And honestly, this is still just a stupid versus monster mash movie. Like there's no reason to expect anything more from it than just exactly what you're going to get. But for some reason, I think we all judge them a little more harshly as though we invested in it. You know what? I'm not the one who lost millions on this if it lost millions. I don't care. I just wanted to see aliens fight predators, and I got it. And it wasn't very good, but whatever.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw in some of my criticisms, which is the meat of this movie that we're talking about right now.
I
So
think
we're
the
fighting
meat of this
predators.
movie is contained within the alien exoskeleton, and you probably shouldn't eat it because it's acidic.
Yeah, you also probably shouldn't cut off the head and give somebody a fucking spear out of the tail. Be like, shove your arm in that head. Shove your arm in that head. It's fine. It's
I had a when
fine.
I remember feeling like there was probably a longer version of that scene where we where we see that in a slightly better way. I think honestly that was actually taken from one of the comics
That's what I
where
assumed,
it
but it still
probably
looked
works
like
a little
shit.
better. I think it's a fine idea. I think that using the alien head skull exoskeleton as like an arm shield and a spear for tail, I think that totally works. I think that
Sure,
the movie
do
could have
it
done a
better.
better job. It is another thing where something that should have taken quite a while took like 14 seconds.
Yeah. And also, the three predators that are sent down into the pyramid to fight, two of them die within about 2.5 minutes of one another, and one of them survives. He's clearly the cool hardcore one. Let's go hardcore guy. And then we go around and correct me if I'm wrong. This is one of the things that I was planning on taking a little bit more notes on if I'd actually gotten around to not falling asleep because this movie sucks so hard. Uh there were more aliens than there were people to have been hosts for.
It definitely seemed like that to me. And I've never run the numbers.
Yeah.
But it all
Like a
seemed a
lot.
little yeah, it all seemed a little weird. And I mean, I'm sure that someone has done a better job of cataloging this. It absolutely seemed that there were more. It also seems like besides the changing the timeline for the gestation, they go from like chest bursters to full grown fucking aliens in moments.
Yeah.
it's it's a little iffy. Um, but again, I think that if you know that going in, like I think that that is supposed to be a signal to you that we're just going to have a good time. I think it lands as we don't really know what we're doing. And I think there's a tonal way to make these events work better. But this movie fails to nail a lot of things and does not have the nuance to do something like that.
Yeah. No, and it was an embarrassment to the franchise. It should not have happened in the way that it did. It wasn't fun to me. Um I could see where somebody who was less invested than I am would have had more fun. And I'm not invested in this. I liked Predator when I saw it. When I was 10, whatever the fuck it was when the second one came out, I watched that in the theater. You know how many times I've seen that movie? The
That
one
one time.
time
Yeah.
because it sucked.
It's no,
It
it was
was
not good.
terrible. I was
Predator
like 9
2
or 10.
Predator 2, like the whole like using like the urban jungle idea, that absolutely has promise, and like 1990 was not the year to do it. Like
Yeah.
if if they had made that story today, it would have been a lot more interesting, but it was not good. I think that the reason that this movie is fun for me and it didn't even particularly bother me at the time is because I read all the comics as they were coming out. I was a huge
Right.
Dark Horse kid. And so I was fine with an okay Alien versus Predator movie. I never thought we were going to get one at all. There were worse comic stories and there were better comic stories. Um, I wish that this one had been more respectful to the lore, and I don't think it would have been that hard for them to accomplish that. Um, but it was, I mean, I think that the essential relationship between the two alien species makes sense. I think that like that nugget of the premise, which is pretty vital to like setting up a versus story. I think at the very least, that is an easy thing for me to buy into. Um, Everything else about the execution is pretty iffy, but the basic idea works, and it was just executed poorly. And then the whole thing with the queen at the end seems like really sloppy.
So, I mean, I thought it was kind of cute, but really mostly irritating when it's all like, let's all bleed all over her restraints. Yeah, sure, release her. Don't you think they would have made something that wasn't going to be like blood, acid? They would have put something better on her because I mean, you got restraints. You can make yourself bleed on it anyway. She would have gotten out her
Yeah,
own.
it does seem like that would be a problem that the Predators could have solved
Yeah,
fairly easily.
yeah. And then so we're jumping ahead here right towards the end here when she's fighting at the end with the one female human and the last surviving predator, and she stabs her tail through his chest. Why the fuck did he get pregnant?
Oh no, he got pregnant way before that.
Did he? Did I miss that?
He did. It is a really brief thing, and then they set it up and they never revisit it. Like you literally see a moment where he's in like a chamber by himself, and you hear a sound which is like the screechy, scrabbly face hugger sound, and like the camera is sort of like up by the ceiling looking down, and the predator looks up toward the camera, and there's like a movement, and that's all. And then the next time we catch up with the predator, like everything's fine again. um it's really it seemed weird that it was so like I missed it the first time, and the second time I was like, oh, I guess they did show us that. But it like
All
they're
right.
not making much of an
Well,
effort to tell
I
that
mean,
story.
even if that is part of it, we saw in Alien 3 that aliens are not going to attack those that are gestating their offspring. Also, she
Correct.
stabbed it right through the chest. Why didn't that stab the little baby guy?
I mean, I do we see how like exactly where the wound is? Because we're sort of like we're to one side. Like I don't know. I was willing to forgive that, and I could even forgive the like attacking someone that's a host because first of all, it's a life and death situation. Also, what we saw in Alien 3 was aliens not attacking someone who was host to a queen embryo, which
True.
is significant. So this may have just been like, fuck you, you're my kid.
Maybe.
Maybe. I'm
Either
not
way,
saying that this movie didn't commit any crimes. I'm just like
this
I'm not
movie
sure
is
that's one of
crime.
them, but that the whole like it seems pretty sloppy to leave it with the queen just kind of chained to a water tank like underneath the ocean,
Yeah.
clearly still alive. Like that seems like a
Yeah.
bit of a problematic setup. And that's not even what the sequel is about. And yes, sadly there is actually a sequel to this movie.
A direct sequel, even.
Yes, it is a direct sequel, and it is far worse. And I remember I watched it one time. I actually like I have it because I have like a two disc set that had both movies for like $4. Um I watched it when it first came out, and I tried to watch it one more time when I got it on DVD. And I couldn't even make it through it. It was just I remember my thought the first time was, wow, how could a movie this violent be this boring? And I started trying to watch it again, and I was like, oh, right, it's really boring. And then I stopped. Because I didn't think this movie was boring. This movie isn't very good, but I didn't think it was boring. The next one was boring. Like,
Well, I guess we're gonna have to watch it.
it has teenagers in it.
Guess we're gonna have to watch it.
I mean, it's your funeral.
Hey, you
And
made me
again,
watch this.
remember everyone has to be contained at the end, or else the movie Alien doesn't work. So yeah, that's like you go into it knowing what that you sort of know how it's going to end before you start watching it.
Yeah, it's like Star Wars Rogue One.
I never saw that because Star Wars is boring.
It is just like this.
This is better than any Star Wars
I
movie.
mean, let's have a fucking mashup of that
This
bullshit.
is this is
Alien
more
versus Star
respectful to the
Wars
lore than
versus
any Star
Predator.
Wars movie. I would watch Star Wars versus Predator. I would also watch The Fast and the Furious versus Jurassic Park.
I have never bothered with a Fast and Furious, and I'm not interested now.
How about Attack of the Killer Tomatoes versus Teen Wolf 2?
Um,
That's the one with Jason Bateman, not Michael J. Fox.
uh, what? There was a Teen Wolf 2 that didn't have Michael J. Fox?
Correct.
Was Michael J. Fox not in Teen Wolf 2?
No, he never was.
Oh, I was like
There's
six
there
years
is
old.
no version of Teen Wolf 2 that does contain Michael J. Fox.
When did Teen Wolf 2 come out?
I don't know, sometime after Teen Wolf, I guess.
Oh, I mean,
It stars
usually
Jason
that's the case.
Bateman, and it has the woman who was the mom in Better Off Dead.
Cool. Ooh. 1987.
So
Yeah, I was 4.5, 5 years old. I can be forgiven.
I can't believe you don't remember it.
Matt, I saw that movie as many
We
times as I
only
saw Teen
we
Wolf.
only allowed you to be born so that we could take you to see Teen Wolf 2
I know
when you were 4.5.
I know Teen Wolf because of surfing on the van and give me keg of beer.
Yeah,
And I
that's
know
really all
Teen
you
Wolf
that's
2
all you need to know.
because apparently there was some weird, scary looking woman who flashed red eyes at one point in it. And that's literally all I remember about it.
That's probably the woman who plays the mom from Better Off Dead.
Did she
Um,
say $2?
no.
Well, that's an
But she
embarrassment
does
right
she
there.
does turn out to be a werewolf. So I'm assuming that's her.
Yeah, probably. That's all
I
I
don't
have.
really remember.
Yeah, I know nothing about the movie other than that. I think that
Did you
she
ever
was wearing a
see
brown pantsuit.
did you ever see Dollman versus Demonic Toys? That's a good versus movie.
I definitely saw some Doll Man things,
That's
but I
in that's
don't know
in
that one.
the big Full Moon Entertainment folder that I loaned you. It's got you got to watch Dollman and Demonic Toys and then Dollman versus Demonic Toys, which is a sequel to not only Dollman and Demonic Toys, but also Bad Channels, which is another one of those terrible Full Moon movies in there. It's all three of them together. And it is way better than Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys, which is so bad it has Corey Feldman in it.
Ooh. Is he the one that's still alive?
Yes, he is the one that's still alive, and who I sort of respect as a human being. He doesn't have the best career, but I feel like he's probably a decent guy,
He certainly tries to be,
and
which is
he's the
better
best.
than some.
He's in the best of all of the original Friday the 13th movies.
Was he in
He's
more
in
than
part
one?
four. No, but he's in the best one.
Oh, okay.
He is unfortunately not in any of the others. His character is in like two other movies, but he doesn't play it. There was like a time jump. They needed him to be older.
Ah, he played a kid who claimed at one point to be Jason.
He was a kid who was obsessed with special effects makeup, and at a point during the climax, he makes himself up to look like original child Jason as an act of confusion. And it sort of works.
And I know this entirely because of With Gorley and Rust.
Well, that's a good reason. That's it. They're good guys.
They are.
But what about Gorley versus Rust?
I know nothing about this,
Who
but
would
I
who
think
would win in a fight between Gorley and
I,
Rust?
I think they'd probably hug it out and maybe go mall walking.
I think you're probably right. But if we force them to fight each other, Like
They
if we
would
put control
probably
collars on them like in a monster movie and force them to battle.
they would have a cup of hot brown.
And pumpkin spiders.
Yeah, it'd be fine. You can't stop these guys. They both won.
Nobody can stop the friendship.
Yeah, they both won. Oh, we're almost out of time.
What are we gonna do?
I'm gonna say this movie sucked.
Oh, no apologies. It's amazing. It's not
I'm
very amazing.
I'm
It's
glad that
okay.
I watched it, but it was not good.
Freddy versus Jason next.
All right, all right. We'll have to figure it out. I don't know where it's at, but we'll find it.
It could be worse.
It will be.
Any minute now.
All right. I love you, Matt.
I love you, Ted. Until next time.
Until next time.
Depot Devoid is hosted by Matt Fagan and Ted Fagan. Depot Devoid is not hosted by Ian Fagan because he died and we miss him. Reach us at depotdevoidpodcast@gmail.com.